You did not arrive here by accident, and this moment is not a neutral pause in your day. The fact that you are hearing these words now is already evidence of alignment in motion. This video is not information being presented to you. It is a gateway responding to you. The quantum field does not choose through logic, chance, or curiosity. It responds to resonance. Something in your internal state matched what is being transmitted here, and the match occurred before the mind could evaluate it. Selection does not announce itself with drama. It arrives quietly, as familiarity without memory. As recognition without proof. You may feel a subtle settling, a soft internal yes, or even a calm alertness that has no obvious cause. This is how the field signals coherence. Not through excitement, not through urgency, but through a sense of inevitability. You did not find this message. You aligned with it. The mind often believes it is the navigator, scanning options and making choices. In reality, it is the last to know. The deeper intelligence that moves through emotion, sensation, and attention had already tuned you to this frequency before conscious thought became involved. This is why the experience feels different from ordinary content. There is no persuasion happening here. No convincing. Only remembering. A gateway does not open when you push against it. It opens when you match it. And the match has already occurred. That is why this feels less like learning something new and more like being reminded of something ancient and obvious. The field does not reward effort. It mirrors state. It reflects back what you are being, not what you are trying to become. This is the first threshold, understanding that the shift is not ahead of you. It is not waiting for more information, more discipline, or more belief. It is already underway because the frequency that creates access is present now. The sensation of being drawn here is not passive. It is participation. You are already inside the mechanism you think you are observing. There is no hierarchy in selection. No chosen ones and outsiders. There is only coherence and incoherence. When coherence stabilizes, access becomes natural. When it fades, access dissolves without punishment. The field is precise, neutral, and responsive. It does not judge readiness. It reflects it. Let this land without analysis. The more you attempt to dissect why this is happening, the more distance you introduce. Recognition does not require explanation. In fact, explanation often arrives later as a side effect. For now, what matters is noticing the absence of resistance. The calm curiosity. The sense that nothing needs to be proven. This is not the beginning of a journey. Journeys imply distance. This is the moment you realize you never left alignment, you only forgot how it feels. And remembering does not take time. It takes allowance. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and remain within it. Before the mind forms a sentence, before logic assembles an explanation, something else has already responded. That response is recognition. It is not intellectual. It does not argue or persuade. It registers as a quiet certainty, a bodily ease, an emotional settling that arrives without asking permission from thought. This is how truth enters first. Understanding comes later, if it comes at all. The mind is trained to believe it must grasp something before it can be real. But reality does not wait for comprehension. The quantum field does not respond to conclusions. It responds to coherence. And coherence is felt, not reasoned. You have experienced this countless times, knowing without knowing why, sensing alignment without evidence, feeling resistance before a single logical objection appears. These are not flaws in perception. They are evidence of a more primary intelligence operating beneath thought. Recognition is immediate because it is nonlinear. It does not move step by step. It lands as a whole. The body feels it as relaxation or alertness. The emotional field registers it as expansion rather than contraction. There is no urgency attached to it, no need to convince anyone else. When recognition is present, effort drops away naturally. You do not chase what you already know is yours. This is why understanding cannot be the gate. If comprehension were required, alignment would always be delayed. The mind would need to analyze, compare, and measure before allowing access. But the field does not operate on delay. It responds now. Resonance opens doors instantly, because resonance is a state, not a process. When people say they are confused, what they often mean is that their mind has not caught up with what their system already knows. Confusion is not a lack of truth. It is a lag between recognition and interpretation. And that lag is not a problem. It is a natural adjustment period where identity recalibrates to a higher coherence. Notice how the most meaningful realizations in your life did not arrive through effortful reasoning. They arrived as moments of clarity that felt obvious the instant they appeared. The explanation came later, sometimes much later. This is the correct order. Recognition first. Understanding second. Sometimes optional. Trying to reverse this order creates strain. You begin to demand proof before permission, logic before alignment. And the moment you do that, the body tightens, the emotional field contracts, and access narrows. Not as punishment, but as feedback. The field mirrors your state precisely. This is why forcing yourself to figure it out never brings peace. Peace arrives when recognition is trusted. When you allow yourself to rest in what feels true before you can articulate it. This is not anti-intellectual. It is pre-intellectual. The mind has a role, but it is not the initiator. It is the translator. Let yourself notice what has already landed as you listen. Not the thoughts that comment on it, but the quieter signal underneath. That signal is the doorway. The more you honor it, the clearer everything becomes without effort. Like the video now as a confirmation that this recognition has landed. What you call an accident is simply an interaction you did not yet recognize as coherent. Randomness is not a force in the universe. It is a label the mind applies when it cannot trace the pattern quickly enough. The quantum field does not scatter events blindly. It arranges encounters through alignment, drawing experiences together the same way similar frequencies naturally converge. When two states match, they meet. No intention is required. No prediction is involved. Coherence alone is sufficient. This is why certain moments feel charged with meaning even before you assign meaning to them. The sensation comes first. The explanation follows, if you choose to look for one. Coincidence is not an exception to order. It is evidence of it. When something arrives at the precise moment it can be received, that is not luck. That is synchronization. The field is constantly responding to your internal state, adjusting the environment to reflect what you are ready to notice, not what you are trying to control. The mind prefers stories of chance because they preserve the illusion of separation. If events are random, then nothing is responding to you. You are small, passive, and at the mercy of external forces. But when randomness dissolves, a different truth becomes unavoidable. You are in continuous dialogue with reality, whether you are aware of it or not. This dialogue is not conducted in words. It is conducted in frequency. Emotional tone, expectation, self-perception, and presence all broadcast information into the field. The field responds not by granting wishes, but by arranging mirrors. What appears in your experience is feedback, showing you the state you are inhabiting. This does not mean every event is pleasant. Coherence does not equal comfort. Sometimes the field presents contrast to refine clarity. Sometimes it introduces disruption to expose misalignment. But even these moments are not random. They are precise. They arrive with exact timing, neither early nor late, calibrated to the moment recognition becomes possible. Think of how often something appears only after you stop searching for it. Or how an answer arrives the moment you stop insisting on one. These are not quirks of fate. They are demonstrations of how allowing sharpens coherence. When resistance drops, alignment becomes visible. Nothing in your experience is wasted. Every encounter carries information. The difference between confusion and insight is not intelligence, but openness. When you assume randomness, you miss the message. When you assume responsiveness, you begin to read the pattern. The field does not need you to believe in it. It does not require agreement. It functions regardless. But awareness changes how you move within it. You stop chasing explanations and start observing responses. You stop asking why this happened and start noticing what it reflects. This is not about blaming yourself for circumstances. Responsibility here is not moral. It is vibrational. You are not at fault for what appears, but you are always informed by it. Reality is not testing you. It is communicating with you. Once accidents dissolve, life becomes less dramatic and more precise. You stop waiting for signs and realize the sign is always the experience itself. And the more clearly you read it, the more coherent the conversation becomes. Emotion is not a side effect of experience. It is the mechanism through which experience is selected. Before thought labels what is happening, emotion has already tuned perception to a specific layer of reality. This is not symbolic. It is functional. Emotion is the primary technology through which dimensional movement occurs. Most people are taught to see emotion as a reaction to circumstances, something that happens after events unfold. In truth, emotion is an interface. It is how consciousness inputs instructions into the field and receives feedback in return. Each emotional state carries a distinct frequency, and each frequency corresponds to a different range of experiences that can be perceived, accessed, and sustained. When emotion is contracted, reality appears narrow, heavy, resistant. Options seem limited. Time feels slow or oppressive. When emotion expands, reality opens. Possibilities multiply. Synchronicities increase. Movement becomes effortless. These are not psychological tricks. They are dimensional shifts. You are not changing the world. You are changing the layer of the world you are tuned into. Emotion functions like an access code. Not because it demands anything, but because it matches something. The field does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are emitting. And what you emit is not words or affirmations. It is emotional tone. The body broadcasts this continuously, without pause. Every moment, you are tuned somewhere. Expansion is the signal of alignment. It feels like ease, clarity, relief, openness, calm certainty. Contraction is the signal of misalignment. It feels like tension, urgency, heaviness, confusion, resistance. Neither is wrong. Both are information. Emotion is guidance, not a command to act or suppress. It is a navigation system showing you where coherence increases or decreases. The mistake is trying to use emotion as a tool to force outcomes. That immediately collapses its function. The moment you try to generate a feeling to get something, you introduce control. Control creates resistance. Resistance distorts the signal. The field responds to authenticity, not performance. Genuine emotional states shift dimensions effortlessly. Manufactured ones do not. This is why calm receptivity is so powerful. Calm is not neutral. It is highly ordered. It indicates low internal resistance, which allows the field to reorganize around you with minimal friction. Intensity, on the other hand, is often mistaken for power. But intensity usually contains instability. It spikes frequency without coherence, leading to brief movement followed by collapse. You do not need to chase elevated emotions. You only need to listen to them. When something feels expansive, it is an invitation. When something feels contractive, it is a warning. Not a moral judgment. A directional cue. The more precisely you respond to these cues, the more fluidly you move between dimensional states. This is also why contrast exists. Without contraction, expansion would be indistinguishable. Without resistance, flow would have no reference point. Contrast sharpens alignment. It clarifies preference. It refines frequency. The field uses contrast to help you recognize where coherence naturally increases. Emotion does not ask you to fix it, analyze it, or overcome it. It asks you to notice it. The moment you stop arguing with what you feel, the signal becomes clear. And clarity, not effort, is what opens access. Dimensional movement is not dramatic. It is subtle, continuous, and precise. It happens every time your emotional state shifts. You are not trying to reach another world. You are constantly selecting which one you are in. Control feels like safety to the mind, but to the field it reads as interference. The tighter you grip an outcome, the narrower the range of responses available to you. This is not philosophical. It is mechanical. Control collapses dimensional bandwidth because it fixes attention on a single imagined path, excluding all others that might align more naturally. Forcing is an attempt to override the intelligence of the field with personal will. It assumes that the mind knows the optimal route, the correct timing, the appropriate form. But the mind sees only fragments. It operates on past data, learned patterns, and limited perception. When it insists, it introduces friction. That friction is felt as effort, delay, exhaustion, or repeated resistance. Allowing is not the absence of direction. It is the absence of obstruction. When you allow, you are not giving up power. You are removing noise. You are letting coherence lead instead of anxiety. The field responds to this immediately, because low resistance is easier to organize around than high intention. Surrender is often misunderstood as passivity because it lacks drama. It does not strain. It does not argue. It does not demand proof. But surrender is highly active at the vibrational level. It signals trust in the larger order of intelligence that is already coordinating far more variables than the conscious mind can track. When surrender is genuine, timing improves, pathways multiply, and effort drops without anything being lost. Notice how control always carries tension. Even when it succeeds temporarily, it must be maintained. The moment attention slips, the structure collapses. This is because control is not self-sustaining. It requires constant energy input. Allowing, by contrast, stabilizes itself. Once coherence is established, the field maintains it with minimal correction. This is why forcing often produces short-lived results. You may get movement, but it comes with instability. The outcome arrives strained, conditional, or fragile. And you must keep managing it to prevent regression. Flow does not behave this way. Flow deepens with use. The more you allow, the more responsive reality becomes. Allowing does not mean accepting what you do not prefer. It means releasing the internal struggle against what is currently present. The moment resistance drops, information becomes available. From that clarity, aligned action can arise naturally, without urgency or compulsion. Action taken from allowing is precise. Action taken from control is noisy. The field is not impressed by effort. It is calibrated to coherence. When you stop trying to make something happen, you often notice it beginning to arrange itself. This is not coincidence. It is the natural consequence of removing interference. The signal becomes clean. The response becomes clear. If you are paying attention, control always announces itself through contraction. Tightness in the body. Pressure in the chest. Urgency in thought. Allowing feels different. It feels spacious. Calm. Alert without strain. That is the state the field can work with most efficiently. This is not a lesson in doing nothing. It is a lesson in doing less internally so that what needs to move can move without obstruction. The more you trust coherence, the less you need to manage outcomes. Comment with the words, "I am ready," to anchor this timeline. Intensity is often mistaken for power, but intensity without coherence is unstable. It feels strong in the moment, charged, dramatic, convincing. Yet it cannot hold. It rises quickly and collapses just as fast, leaving exhaustion, disappointment, or the sense that something almost worked. The field does not sustain spikes. It sustains signals. Coherence is different. It is quiet, consistent, and self-reinforcing. It does not announce itself with urgency. It feels like steadiness, clarity, grounded presence. Coherence does not demand attention because it does not need to prove anything. It simply remains. And because it remains, the field can organize around it. Emotional intensity usually comes from wanting something to change. It carries an undercurrent of lack. Even when the emotion feels positive, there is often pressure beneath it. A need for confirmation. A desire for quick movement. This pressure fractures the signal. The field receives mixed information, attraction layered with resistance. The result is fragmented manifestation. Stable frequency, on the other hand, emerges when you are no longer trying to get somewhere else. It is the emotional tone of being settled in the present moment. From this state, movement still occurs, but it is clean. Outcomes arrive without forcing, and they tend to endure because they are not built on emotional volatility. This is why calm receptivity is more powerful than excitement. Excitement burns hot and fast. Calm coherence burns steadily. One consumes energy. The other conserves it. The field prefers efficiency. It responds more fully to a signal that does not fluctuate wildly from moment to moment. Think of coherence as a current and intensity as a surge. A surge can move things briefly, but a current reshapes landscapes over time. When your emotional state stabilizes, reality begins to reflect that stability. Patterns become predictable in a beneficial way. Synchronicities increase not because you are trying harder, but because your signal is no longer distorted. This does not mean suppressing emotion. Suppression is another form of control, and it creates its own instability. Coherence allows emotion to pass without clinging to it. Feelings can rise and fall while the underlying state remains steady. This steadiness is what the field locks onto. Notice how the most aligned states do not feel dramatic. They feel obvious. Simple. Almost ordinary. That ordinariness is a sign of deep alignment. When something is truly coherent, it does not need to announce itself with intensity. It fits. Intensity often seeks repetition. You want to feel it again, recreate the peak, chase the sensation. Coherence does not need repetition because it does not fade. It becomes the baseline. From that baseline, creation happens naturally, without emotional manipulation. Fragmentation occurs when you try to use emotion as fuel instead of guidance. The moment emotion is used to push, it destabilizes. When emotion is listened to and allowed to settle, it clarifies. The field mirrors that clarity with sustained results. Alignment is not about how strongly you feel. It is about how consistently you remain open. The quieter the signal, the easier it is for reality to respond. This is the difference between movement that flashes and movement that lasts. Coherence over intensity is not a preference. It is a law. The present moment is not a point in time. It is the only point where time can be accessed at all. Everything that appears as past or future exists only as interpretation within now. This is why creation does not travel. It does not move forward. It emerges. And it can only emerge here. The quantum field does not operate across timelines the way the mind imagines. It does not wait for later. It does not retrieve from before. It responds to state in real time. Now is not a slice of experience. It is the interface. The moment attention leaves it, power dissolves into memory or projection, neither of which can generate anything new. Most effort is wasted trying to act on imagined futures or correct imagined pasts. This splits attention and fractures coherence. When attention is divided, the signal weakens. The field responds weakly. When attention consolidates into now, the signal sharpens. Response becomes immediate, not because reality speeds up, but because resistance drops away. Presence is not passive awareness. It is full availability. When you are present, you are not managing outcomes. You are not rehearsing explanations. You are not preparing defenses. You are open. And openness is what allows the field to reorganize around you without delay. The mind believes power comes from planning. In truth, planning is only useful once presence is established. Without presence, plans are built on assumptions disconnected from current reality. With presence, action becomes obvious. Minimal. Effective. Often surprising in its simplicity. Notice how clarity never comes while you are rushing ahead mentally. It comes when you stop. When attention settles. When the internal noise quiets enough for information to surface. That information is not being sent from elsewhere. It is revealed because you are finally available to receive it. The present moment is where emotion stabilizes, where coherence can be felt directly rather than inferred. This is why creation happens here. Not because now is special, but because it is unobstructed. Past and future are filters. Now is clear glass. Waiting is a refusal to inhabit this clarity. Regret is a refusal to leave it. Both remove you from the only point where adjustment can occur. The field does not punish this. It simply responds with silence, because there is no signal to respond to. When you fully occupy the present moment, effort reduces naturally. You do not need to push, because you are already aligned with what is happening. From this state, even small actions carry disproportionate impact. Not because they are amplified, but because they are precise. This is also why forcing feels exhausting. It attempts to generate movement without presence. It pulls energy from imagined futures and drags it into now, creating tension. Presence does the opposite. It releases the future from your grip and allows it to assemble itself. Power is not something you accumulate over time. It is something you allow by stopping resistance to what is already here. The moment you stop postponing alignment, it becomes available. Now is not a moment you enter. It is the condition you stop leaving. And the instant you stop leaving it, creation resumes without effort. Waiting appears harmless, even patient, but to the field it is a precise signal. Waiting communicates that something is missing now and expected later. It projects fulfillment into an imagined future and removes it from the present moment. The quantum field does not interpret waiting as trust. It interprets it as absence. The field responds only to what is active. Presence is active. Waiting is not. When you wait, you suspend coherence. You tell reality that alignment has not yet occurred, that readiness is conditional, that completion is postponed. The field reflects this exactly by maintaining the delay you are signaling. This is why waiting feels heavy. There is an internal tension beneath it, even when it is disguised as patience. Waiting requires holding an image of what is not here while standing in what is. That split fractures attention. Fractured attention weakens the signal. A weak signal produces slow or inconsistent feedback. Presence communicates something entirely different. Presence says, nothing is missing. Presence says, this moment is sufficient. Presence says, I am available now. The field recognizes this immediately because presence is coherent. It is undivided. It does not ask for permission from the future. Manifestation is not attracted by desire. Desire often contains waiting. Manifestation is stabilized by readiness. Readiness is not a thought. It is a state. You can feel the difference. Readiness feels settled. It feels like you could receive without adjustment. Waiting feels like leaning forward, anticipating, bracing. The paradox is that what you are waiting for cannot arrive while you are waiting for it. Not because it is withheld, but because the state you are in cannot perceive or hold it yet. The field is not teasing you. It is mirroring you. Presence does not mean pretending you do not want something. That would be resistance in another form. Presence means releasing the assumption that fulfillment exists somewhere other than now. When that assumption dissolves, the emotional tone changes. The body relaxes. Attention stabilizes. The signal clears. From this state, things often appear suddenly, as if out of nowhere. This creates the illusion that timing was unpredictable. In reality, timing became obvious the moment readiness replaced waiting. The field did not speed up. You stopped slowing it down. Waiting also places identity in the future. You become someone who will be whole later, complete later, aligned later. Presence collapses that identity. You are not becoming ready. You are being ready. That shift alone reorganizes experience. Notice how the most meaningful arrivals in your life came when you were not waiting for them. You were engaged. Present. Absorbed. That absorption is not distraction. It is coherence. The field moves easily through coherent states because there is nothing to push against. Waiting feels responsible. Presence feels risky. Presence requires trust because it removes the buffer of expectation. But that is precisely why it works. Expectation manages outcomes. Presence allows outcomes. The moment you stop monitoring time, time reorganizes. The moment you stop checking for signs, signs become unnecessary. The moment you stop waiting, you become available. The field does not ask when you want something. It asks who you are now. And it answers that question instantly, every time. Stillness is misunderstood because it looks like nothing is happening. From the outside, it appears passive, unproductive, even stagnant. But within the mechanics of the field, stillness is acceleration. It is the state where resistance drops to zero, allowing alignment to move faster than effort ever could. Movement created through reaction is slow. Every reaction adds friction because it is shaped by past conditioning, emotional charge, and mental interpretation. Reaction responds to what has already happened. Stillness responds to what is available now. That difference is everything. One reinforces delay. The other collapses it. Non-reactivity does not mean suppression. It means allowing experience to pass through without interference. When you stop immediately labeling, judging, or adjusting what arises, you remove layers of internal noise. That noise is what slows manifestation. Not because it is wrong, but because it fragments attention. The field responds cleanly only to clean signals. Stillness produces a signal without distortion. There is no urgency in it. No argument. No demand. Just availability. And availability is the fastest state because nothing is being resisted. This is why clarity often arrives when you stop thinking about a problem. The solution was not hiding. The noise was. The moment mental movement quiets, information surfaces on its own. The field does not need you to chase answers. It needs you to stop blocking them. Inner quiet is not emptiness. It is coherence. In stillness, emotional tone stabilizes, attention consolidates, and perception sharpens. You become sensitive to subtle cues that were always present but drowned out by constant internal motion. These cues guide action more precisely than analysis ever could. Acceleration through stillness feels counterintuitive because the mind equates speed with effort. But effort is compensatory. It exists only when alignment is missing. When alignment is present, movement requires less energy, not more. The fastest outcomes often arise from the least dramatic internal states. Stillness also prevents unnecessary detours. Reactivity creates branching paths that must be corrected later. Stillness allows the most direct path to reveal itself. This does not eliminate action. It refines it. Action taken from stillness is minimal and effective. There is no excess. Notice how resistance always announces itself through urgency. A need to respond. A need to fix. A need to decide immediately. Stillness interrupts this loop. It creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, alignment chooses for you. The field moves fastest where it encounters the least obstruction. Inner quiet is not withdrawal from life. It is deep engagement without interference. From this state, reality reorganizes rapidly because it does not have to work around internal conflict. Stillness is also how timelines shift without drama. There is no announcement. No struggle. One moment you are reacting. The next, you are observing. And observation alone changes the field you are in. Perception shifts. Options appear. Tension dissolves. Acceleration does not feel like rushing. It feels like things clicking into place. Like effort dropping away. Like outcomes arriving without strain. That is the signature of stillness at work. You do not need to cultivate stillness as a practice. You only need to stop feeding noise. The moment you do, alignment speeds up naturally. This is not a technique. It is a law. Identity is not a description of who you are. It is the mechanism through which reality organizes itself around you. Before events unfold, before circumstances take shape, identity has already selected the range of experiences that can appear. This selection is not deliberate. It is automatic. The field responds to being, not to wanting. Wanting always implies distance. It assumes that fulfillment exists somewhere else, attached to a future version of you that has not yet arrived. Identity collapses that distance. Identity is who you are being now, without negotiation. And the moment identity stabilizes, reality rearranges itself to match it. The field does not ask what you desire. It asks what state you are inhabiting. Desire can be intense and still ineffective if it contradicts identity. You can want abundance while identifying as someone who struggles. You can want connection while identifying as someone who waits to be chosen. In each case, the field follows identity, not intention. This is why effort alone does not create lasting change. Effort tries to move outcomes without shifting the one thing outcomes are anchored to. Being does not push. It declares. It does not argue with reality. It presents a stable signal that reality has no choice but to reflect. Identity operates beneath thought. You do not need to say, I am, statements for it to function. It is encoded in posture, expectation, emotional baseline, and what feels normal to you. Normal is powerful. The field treats what feels normal as what should continue. When identity shifts, timelines shift. Not gradually. Immediately. The external world may take time to visibly reorganize, but the selection happens at once. From that moment on, different options become available, different people appear, different responses emerge. You are no longer on the same track, even if the scenery looks familiar for a while. This is why trying to get something before you feel like the person who has it creates friction. You are asking reality to contradict your identity. It rarely does. When it does, the result feels unstable and temporary. When identity leads, outcomes feel natural and sustainable. Being is not pretending. It is not performing confidence or peace. It is allowing yourself to stop referencing an outdated self-definition. Many identities persist simply because they have not been questioned. They run automatically, shaping perception and behavior without announcing themselves. The moment you notice an identity, you loosen its grip. Awareness alone introduces flexibility. From that flexibility, a new state can stabilize. And once it stabilizes, reality follows without negotiation. This is not about choosing a better story. Stories belong to the mind. Identity belongs to the field. It is felt, not narrated. You know an identity has shifted when effort drops and coherence increases. Things stop feeling uphill. Responses change without explanation. You do not need to chase a new timeline. You select it by being the version of yourself that already belongs there. The field recognizes that instantly. Identity is the switch because it does not ask for permission. It simply is. And reality, precise and neutral, reflects it without delay. Parallel realities are not distant worlds running beside this one somewhere in space or time. They are not future destinations or alternate pasts branching away from a central line. They are layered states of experience existing within the same present moment. You do not travel to them. You tune into them. The idea that timelines are elsewhere comes from linear thinking. The mind imagines reality as a straight path, with forks you either take or miss. The field does not work this way. It operates vertically, not horizontally. Multiple versions of experience coexist now, differentiated not by location, but by frequency. This is why shifts can feel sudden and subtle at the same time. Nothing dramatic appears to change, yet everything feels different. The people around you respond differently. Opportunities appear or disappear. Your perception alters. This is not imagination. It is a lateral movement across layered realities, accomplished without leaving the present moment. Accessing a different timeline does not require force, intention, or visualization. It requires internal adjustment. A slight change in emotional baseline. A release of resistance. A shift in identity. These internal changes retune perception, and perception determines which layer of reality becomes visible and interactive. Think of it like a spectrum. All frequencies exist simultaneously, but you only experience the one you are tuned to. When tuning changes, the station changes instantly. There is no travel time. No transition period. The delay people experience comes from oscillation, not distance. They move between states instead of stabilizing in one. Parallel realities feel unreachable only when you try to access them from the wrong state. Wanting to be somewhere else reinforces the layer you are trying to leave. Presence collapses that gap. The moment you stop reaching, you often find yourself already there. This is why small internal shifts can produce disproportionate external changes. You are not pushing reality to rearrange itself. You are stepping into a version of reality where that arrangement already exists. The field does not build outcomes from scratch. It reveals what matches. Nothing external needs to change first. Waiting for circumstances to shift before allowing yourself to feel different keeps you locked in the same layer. Internal change is the key, not the reward. Once the internal state stabilizes, the corresponding reality becomes obvious. This also explains why trying to convince others or control environments rarely works. You cannot drag another layer of reality into your current frequency. You must move into it. And when you do, the environment responds automatically, without confrontation. Parallel realities are not better or worse. They are simply different expressions of coherence. Each one teaches something. Each one reflects something. You are never trapped in one. You are only tuned. The subtlety of this mechanism is what makes it powerful. There is no drama announcing a shift. No signpost saying you have arrived. There is only a quiet sense that things are working differently now. That ease is the indicator. You do not need to map timelines or analyze possibilities. Analysis keeps attention scattered. What matters is noticing where you are emotionally, energetically, and perceptually. Adjust that, and the layer changes on its own. Parallel realities are not elsewhere. They are here, stacked within this moment, waiting for the frequency that can perceive them. The moment that frequency becomes you, access is immediate. The fifth dimension is not a destination layered above your current life. It is not a place you travel to or a state you earn through effort. It is a mode of interaction with reality defined by reduced resistance. When resistance drops, responsiveness increases. That is the fifth dimensional state. In this state, feedback becomes immediate. Not because reality accelerates, but because distortion dissolves. You are no longer filtering experience through excessive expectation, control, or interpretation. What you offer is received cleanly. What the field returns is recognized without delay. Cause and effect feel closer together because fewer internal obstacles stand between them. Effortless synchronicity is the signature. Events line up without strain. Encounters arrive without searching. Information appears at the exact moment it can be used. This is not magic. It is efficiency. The system functions optimally when friction is minimal. The fifth dimension is simply the name given to that level of coherence. Resistance is not always dramatic. Often it is subtle. A quiet doubt. A background urgency. A habit of bracing for what comes next. These small tensions scatter the signal. When they release, alignment stabilizes. The field does not need to work around you. It can work with you. In the fifth dimensional state, there is less emotional oscillation. Not because feelings disappear, but because they pass through without sticking. You do not cling to expansion or resist contraction. Both are allowed to inform without hijacking direction. This creates a sense of emotional spaciousness that feels light and grounded at the same time. Time behaves differently here. It feels less pressurized. You are not racing toward outcomes or dragging the past behind you. Actions arise naturally from clarity rather than urgency. Because action is precise, less of it is needed. Results feel disproportionate to effort, not because effort is amplified, but because waste is eliminated. The fifth dimension is often mistaken for constant positivity. In reality, it is constant responsiveness. You meet what arises without internal argument. This neutrality is powerful. It allows reality to adjust instantly because you are not blocking the adjustment with expectation. You will know you are in this state when things stop feeling personal. Not in a detached way, but in a spacious one. Challenges no longer feel like threats. Opportunities no longer feel like tests. Everything feels informative rather than loaded. This neutrality allows coherence to deepen. There is also a sense of quiet confidence here. Not the confidence of certainty, but the confidence of trust. You do not need to know what comes next to remain open. You do not need guarantees to stay present. That trust is not blind. It is experiential. It comes from seeing how reliably the field responds when you stop interfering. The fifth dimension does not require maintenance. It is not a peak state you must hold on to. When resistance returns, responsiveness decreases naturally. When resistance drops again, the state returns just as naturally. There is no punishment for leaving it. Only feedback. This is why chasing the fifth dimension pushes it away. Chasing introduces resistance. Allowing reveals it. You do not enter the fifth dimension. You relax into it. It is not higher than where you are. It is clearer. And clarity is always closer than you think. You are not observing the field from the outside. You are not interacting with it as a separate entity. The realization that changes everything is simple and disarming. You are the field itself, localized as perspective. There was never a boundary. Only a habit of perception that suggested one. The idea of being inside the field implies separation. A subject looking out at an object. A self navigating an external reality. This division is functional for survival, but it is not fundamental. At the deepest level, there is only consciousness appearing as experience. The field is not something you access. It is what you are doing when you experience anything at all. Once this is seen, the entire framework of influence collapses. There is no longer a need to affect reality, because reality is already moving as you. The question shifts from, how do I change the field, to, what state am I expressing right now? The field does not respond to you. It expresses through you. This is why effort has always felt misdirected. You were trying to move something that was already moving. You were trying to persuade something that was already listening. The resistance you felt was not coming from the field. It was coming from the belief that you were separate from it. When the subject-object divide dissolves, control loses its purpose. There is nothing to manage, because there is nothing outside awareness that needs to be arranged. Experience continues, but it is no longer personal in the way it once was. Not distant. Not indifferent. Just unburdened. This does not mean you disappear. The sense of you remains, but it becomes transparent. Identity loosens without vanishing. You still act, choose, respond. But action no longer carries the weight of self-protection or self-improvement. It becomes expression rather than strategy. The field has always been aware of itself through you. Every perception is the field knowing itself from a particular angle. Every emotion is the field modulating its own frequency. Every thought is the field reflecting on its own movement. Nothing is happening to you. It is happening as you. This is why recognition feels like remembering rather than learning. You are not acquiring a new concept. You are dropping an old assumption. The assumption of separation dissolves, and what remains is obvious. So obvious it was overlooked. From this perspective, manifestation is no longer a goal. It is a description of what is already occurring. Reality is continuously forming itself through the state you are embodying. There is no delay, no negotiation, no external authority granting permission. The fear that arises around this realization is subtle. If there is no separation, then there is no one to blame, no one to convince, no one to wait for. Responsibility returns, not as pressure, but as intimacy. You are intimately involved in everything that appears, because everything appears within you. This intimacy is not overwhelming. It is grounding. It removes the need to monitor outcomes. You are not standing apart, checking results. You are inside the process, inseparable from it. Feedback is immediate because it is internal. When the field is no longer something you appeal to, trust deepens naturally. There is nowhere else to go. Nothing else to align with. Alignment is simply allowing yourself to be what you already are, without resistance. You were never inside the field. You were never outside it either. You are the field, momentarily aware of itself, and that awareness is the gateway you thought you were seeking. Seeking begins as a movement toward truth, but it persists only while truth feels distant. The moment recognition stabilizes, seeking loses its function. Not because questions are forbidden, but because the urgency behind them dissolves. You are no longer trying to arrive somewhere else. You are resting in what is already present. Seeking is driven by the assumption that something essential is missing. That assumption creates momentum. Books are read, practices are adopted, ideas are collected. For a time, this movement feels productive. But eventually, it becomes circular. The same insights repeat in different forms. The same questions resurface with new language. This is not failure. It is a signal that the direction of movement is no longer necessary. Recognition does not end curiosity. It ends hunger. Curiosity without hunger is light. It explores without grasping. Seeking with hunger is heavy. It tries to complete itself. When recognition settles, the need for completion fades because nothing feels incomplete anymore. The mind often resists this phase because seeking provided structure. It offered a sense of progress and identity. Letting go of it can feel like standing still. But this stillness is not stagnation. It is coherence. Energy that was previously spent reaching outward now stabilizes inwardly. From that stability, creation begins to occur on its own. Creation is not something you initiate from this state. It is something that happens as a byproduct. When coherence is present, reality organizes itself efficiently. You notice outcomes appearing without planning. Solutions emerge without strategizing. Opportunities align without pursuit. This can feel disorienting at first because effort is no longer the driver. The impulse to seek often returns briefly during this transition. Old habits reassert themselves, suggesting there must be more to find, more to fix, more to understand. But these impulses pass quickly when not fed. They are echoes, not instructions. The system is recalibrating to a new baseline. In coherence, there is no sense of being ahead or behind. Comparison loses relevance. You are not measuring yourself against a future version or a past one. You are simply present. From this presence, action still happens, but it is responsive rather than compensatory. You move when movement is needed and remain still when it is not. This is why effort becomes inefficient here. Effort assumes resistance. When resistance is absent, effort adds noise. Creation that arises from coherence feels obvious. Almost mundane. It does not announce itself with triumph. It simply works. The end of seeking is not the end of growth. It is the end of chasing growth. Growth continues organically, guided by contrast and curiosity rather than lack. You learn because learning is interesting, not because it promises completion. You act because action is clear, not because it proves worth. This state cannot be forced or claimed. The moment you try to adopt it as an identity, it slips away. It arrives naturally when recognition is allowed to deepen without interference. When you stop asking what else is needed, what is needed shows up on its own. Seeking was never wrong. It brought you to the edge of recognition. But it cannot cross that edge for you. Only stillness can. And once stillness stabilizes, seeking dissolves without ceremony. What remains is not emptiness, but quiet productivity. Not striving, but responsiveness. Creation continues, not because you are trying to create, but because coherence naturally expresses itself as form. The gateway was never something you stepped through. It was something that dissolved. At a certain point, there is no longer an entrance, no threshold to cross, no future state to arrive at. The moment you stop orienting toward an opening, you realize the opening was a reflection. It closes inward, revealing that what you were moving toward has always been where you are. Initiation does not end with new information. It ends with recognition stabilizing so completely that anticipation loses its grip. There is nothing left to wait for. Nothing left to unlock. The mechanism has already revealed itself through direct experience, not explanation. What remains is not excitement, but quiet certainty. The mind often expects a conclusion to feel dramatic. A final surge of insight. A climactic realization. But true closure is subtle. It feels like something unnecessary has been set down. The constant orientation toward what's next relaxes. Attention settles back into itself. The searchlight turns off, and what remains is illumination without direction. The gateway closes because it is no longer needed. Gateways exist only while separation is assumed. While there is a sense of distance between awareness and what it seeks. Once that distance collapses, the structure that bridged it dissolves naturally. There is no loss in this. Only simplification. You may notice that nothing external has changed dramatically. The world looks familiar. The rhythm of life continues. But your relationship to it is quieter. Less strained. Less expectant. You are no longer scanning experience for confirmation or meaning. Experience is sufficient on its own. This is not the end of movement. It is the end of compulsive movement. Action still arises, but it does not feel like a strategy for becoming someone else. It feels like expression. You do what is obvious. You stop when stopping is obvious. There is no inner argument about timing. The most reliable sign that the initiation has sealed is the absence of urgency. Not apathy. Not disengagement. Just the absence of pressure. The sense that nothing essential is about to be missed. The sense that you are already where responsiveness happens. Recognition does not need reinforcement. It does not need to be protected or repeated. Once it stabilizes, it becomes the background condition through which everything else passes. You do not think about it constantly. You live from it. This is why the gateway closes into you rather than away from you. It was never external architecture. It was a perceptual structure that collapses once its function is complete. What remains is not a higher place, but a clearer one. There is no final instruction here. No practice to maintain. No state to defend. The field continues to move as it always has. The only difference is that you are no longer standing apart from it, watching for signs of progress. This is not an ending that asks you to remember it. It is an ending that forgets itself, because nothing needs to be held anymore. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it before their timeline closes.